We're really privileged to have as our guest of honor this year, Martin Wolf, the chief economics commentator of the Financial Times. He's also associate editor of the paper. I'm sure you will read Martin's excellent columns in the FT. Always measured, but also always fearless. Martin has a record of hitting moments of history with enough bang to make the buying of the commercial paper, the Financial Times, worth the buck. Our subject for today is what would China and the USA do to avoid war and re-engage commercially? As always, we begin with our guest of honor, making some observations from his experience to get us charged up with comments and questions. Martin, please.
When I was told that this was the question I was going to be asked to answer, what could China and the US do to avoid war and re-engage commercially, my immediate reaction was get rid of both their leaders, because in my view, they are both, in very different ways, absolute catastrophes. There was a debate between Zbigniew Brzezinski and John Mearsheimer on the future of US-China relations. And Brzezinski took the view that I held at the time, that they were manageable, that they could be peaceful and essentially cooperative because they shared so many interests. And Mearsheimer responded, as you would expect John to do, given his history and analytics, that a breakdown in relations and conflict was completely unavoidable. He was in a minority, I think essentially won in that debate, and it seems to me unambiguously the case that he was right. We live in a globalized world. We have created this globalized world through our technology, but with national politics. And we need this globalized world to deliver some fundamental global public goods: protection of the environment, economic stability, global economic development, and of course, security. So how on earth are we going to do this in this context? Well, my view for what we are in now is we're essentially in some sort of very messy transition period, a bit like the period between 1914 and 45, a period when the old order is breaking down and a new order does not yet exist. It's pretty clear that 2007-8 marked the high tide of globalization on most fronts, not all, but on most fronts, certainly in trade and in important aspects of finance. The Western economies in particular never fully recovered and remain profoundly unbalanced in many ways. And then not very long after, remarkably brief period, we got hit by COVID-19. So which has again pushed us back down. So we're in the end in a period of economic trouble, very significant in economic trouble. So finally, where should we go? Well, it seems to be pretty clear that if this world is going to work, it looks as though it's going to be a Kissinger balance of power type world. In fact, I think almost every day it seems to be more obvious that that's the way it's going. But within that world, given that we have this very profound globalized system, we have to work out a modus vivendi with China. We have to manage this relationship. And these are, I think, the three essential elements of this. We have to accept and agree to differ profoundly on really big issues about how societies are run, what a good society is, and on how we interact in important ways. We're just going to have to agree to differ. We're going to have to try to demarcate areas of influence, but this is much more difficult than it used to be when geography was defining. Geography remains, of course, very important, but in a virtual world which is globalized, everybody borders on everybody else. This makes defining areas of influence really hard, perhaps impossible. Third, we have to reach some sort of agreement on what acceptable behavior across the board is, across many, many issues, with some sorts of procedures and penalties for transgressions. I think at the moment we have no idea really how to do this. And finally, within that, of course, since this was the focus of the question, in trade, it seems to me obvious. Countries are going to end up defining what their vital security interests are in trade. And those are areas in which trade and investment are going to be very heavily controlled. And that's, I think, going to get worse. And define acceptable behavior in everything else. Can that be done in trade? Well, at the moment, we're at the stage of destruction, not reconstruction. But that's clearly what we would have to do. My conclusion, this is an incredibly challenging era, very similar to the period in the early 20th century. And we've got to try our best and hope for the best.
Am I more confident that we shall avoid war than when we started? Do I believe that our world trade will increase at the optimum pace when COVID-19 is defeated? Well, no, not totally, I have to say. I think I'm quite concerned that there may be some small local wars, possibly particularly over Taiwan, but some others as well. I think on the whole, I take a very optimistic view. Thank you, Martin, for what has turned out to be an even better event than I had anticipated. We are forever grateful to you. And here's to the very best of you for the coming year.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Martin.